Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I'm your co-host, JP John Paz, for the two-man power trip. Of course, joining me is Mr. Trump Mania himself, Dr. Lavie Marg. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, John. While we're recording this, it's a historic day, a sad day. Hulk Hogan has died. I pulled out a couple artifacts here to show my longtime passion. I think Wrestling's Main Event was an underrated magazine. I thought it was better than the Aftermag. So this actually it's interesting. Talking about how long you've had this, I used to have tracing paper and I would put it over and I would trace Hulk Hogan. I couldn't find the picture,
Wow.
but I remember love doing that. And just one more thing. If you remember the wrestling stickers, I have a Hulk Hogan one as well. But that's that. Actually, before we move on, John, I'm sure you'll be covering it in your main show. Any thoughts you want to share about Hulk Hogan at the moment?
A little somber right now. Just long-time Hulkamaniac. Legit, why I fell in love with wrestling all the way back in the '80s. Lavie, I know me and you are about the same age. So coming up, Hogan was the boom. That was like literally when everybody was kind of just getting wrestling crazy. He became not only mainstream, he's just like a culture icon. Obviously, the most famous wrestler of all time. There's like kind of no doubt about it. But he just became like one of the most famous people. I mean, I thought when Ozzy passed, I was like, man, yeah, it was a lot of coverage for Ozzy Osbourne. Hogan's coverage has like just destroyed it. It's been out the yin yang. MSG's got big stuff hanging out all over MSG about it. Just crazy stuff. Just shocked and sad to hear about it. But yeah, I'll be doing a tribute show and a bunch of stuff on Hulk, pulling out an old interview I did with the Hulkster too. So it'll be Hogan centric for a while for sure.
Yeah, looking forward to listening to that as I huff and puff in my neighborhood, taking my 1 hour jogs, unless I pull a hamstring or something like that. But a special night, a returning guest, a fellow warrior of the road with me, who joined me in a moderated panel all the way downtown Manhattan. It was like 110 degrees, but everyone seemed happy. Somebody not only who has joined the show once, but basically just prior to that, and then almost every week I've basically been reading her full posts from LinkedIn or Twitter and so on. So really a part of the fabric right now. So without further ado, welcome back to Romy Glazer.
What's up, guys? How's it going? Glad to be back. Glad to hang.
So I feel like we're definitely going to talk about TNA Slammiversary, but I want to talk about maybe some non-Slammiversary wrestling posts from you recently. You were talking about TNA and simulcasting and basically free isn't always free. Just kind of break that down, what you were referring to with the TNA, maybe a little bit of YouTube.
Yeah, for sure. So lately, if you've been paying attention to what's been going on in TNA, the team, at least through the summer, from what I've seen, has been either simulcasting the live impacts, which on Access TV or Sportsnet 360 or on TNA Plus, or posting them or having them hosted 24 hours later. So they're either simulcasting it live alongside as like a sidecar. You could watch it on YouTube for free, or the next night. So I noticed it. I thought it was a really interesting strategy. And so that post, or at least where my head was at on that post, was kind of talking through the pros and cons, some of the positives and the negatives on that. There was a new chart that came out from Nielsen that showed, YouTube far and away outpacing a lot of the old traditional media networks. YouTube continues to go up in terms of viewership, and some of the other ones are kind of, either staying the same or maybe going down a little bit. And so I thought it was really interesting, a strategic change from where we were at TNA, where we were keeping a lot of things on TNA Plus and trying to sign up subscribers. I know that's still going on, but it was something I noticed. So I wanted to, mention it a little bit more, pros and cons, and a little bit of, how I might go about doing it if I was them.
It's crazy. I forget who we interviewed, but it was a while back. We were talking about how Tubi is going to outrun Fox, and obviously Fox owns Tubi. And I was like, no way, that sounds crazy. It's actually like basically almost happening, right? I mean, stuff like that where streaming is just outpacing regular, standard television.
100%. I mean, it's one of those things. So, I don't have typical cable. I mean, I do use YouTube TV here at the house. where I watch live sports, which I think is one of the kind of the only categories that's still kind of growing, it feels like, or it's, sit down and must see TV. But everything else, it's I've got a roommate here. It's like we watch Peacock, or we're watching Tubi, or we're watching whatever it is. It's some streaming platform, and we're not just getting our TV from the typical areas you might have found maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I think with all the news coming out about TNA also looking for a bigger media rights deal, wherever that comes from, it's going to be really interesting to see where they land. Just with all of the trends and how they're going to position themselves. So, yeah, it's kind of that gist is where that post came from.
Do you think too much YouTube, though, as far as wrestling? Because it seems like everybody in wrestling is doing a lot of YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, I think pros and cons, right? So YouTube is growing. It's really easy to access. All you do is you open up your computer, you go to the website, and you can watch stuff for free. I think it's great. And I think you can't ignore it if you're a content creator, period. I mean, somebody like Mr. Beast has built, I want to say it's maybe not $1 billion, but, just for conversation, I'll say it's $1 billion business, posting really interesting videos on YouTube. I've got some of his, even instruction manuals on what they're doing and how important thumbnails are. It's like a whole world you can get into. So there's pros, like you can't ignore it as a wrestling content creator or a brand at all. It's just a big question of what are you going to put on there? And how does it fit in your greater strategy? So, for someone who maybe isn't as large as like a TNA or AEW or a WWE, you could put full shows on there. It's very easy for fans to find it and watch it. So, it's great. When you get a little bit bigger, though, the questions start coming around because it costs a lot more to run those things. You've got to put people on the road. You've got to create sets. You've got to do all this stuff. There's a lot of mouths to feed. And so, my suggestion, or at least where my brain is for some of the bigger players, is use it as the top of your funnel. Get people to get hooked in and come to wherever it is that the full shows are going to live. Because I think, it's essential for everything. But, if you're posting live shows on there, maybe you're going to erode a little bit of the value of, other ways you make money. But it all kind of comes down to your strategy, right? And, kind of sitting down and thinking about it all so that, you either, get the maximum reach you want, or you don't shortchange people. So, I don't know. My brain's been all over on that one.
Speaking of all over the place, NWA kind of all over the place. Now they're going to be on Roku. You recently were talking about this too, which is fascinating just because it's is that going to reach more homes than ever, or will it not? But it almost seems like it has to, because Roku is dominating the market.
It's 100% it. I mean, I think, there's boxes, or the software is included in so many TVs. So I tweeted, I said, I loved it because I think for a brand like NWA, it's a no-brainer. Get your content on something that's very easy for people to access. But I think their big challenge is just there's so much content out there. You got to figure out a way to make people actually find it.
I thought this was interesting. You had some pros and cons with Fast in general, the free ad supported. So what would be good and what would be bad about it for NWA? Maybe just do the good first, and then you could talk about what would be bad.
Yeah, fast channels are great. It's big time reach, right? So a lot of people can access it. Fast, for anyone who's listening. It's free ad supported television. I think the T stands for television. Yeah, in there. And so if you think about it, yeah, it's exactly what it says. It's free, so anyone can watch it. Very easy. You turn on your TV, there it is. It's ad supported, so you're not paying anything. The ads are coming in. And for brands that maybe want to go that direction, they'll kind of sell ads on your behalf, and you'll get a rev share for the content that you give to them. So it's a really turnkey way to make some money. But like anything with TV, the hardest part about a lot of this stuff is you also don't know who your fans are. And so, when you go super big and you're let's say like a WWE or an AEW, and you've got a huge fan base, like you can kind of find other ways to figure out who these people are. But if you're a smaller brand that's maybe starting out, it's also really important to have a kind of one-to-one relationship with your fan, whether that's their email address or their phone, so you can actually, one fan changes things at a smaller scale, whereas like one fan maybe doesn't at a bigger scale. So kind of the negative side of maybe, going to a fast channel or anything kind of more regular media is that, you may be, it's a little bit tougher to maybe get that one-to-one relationship. Like you can still do it. It just kind of all goes back to, what we talked about before. What's your strategy? And, do you have one?
If you have that built-in audience, it's kind of easier, right? I mean, because you already have a kind of a huge fan base, like AAA. They're just throwing them into WWE and NXT, and they already have the fan base, so they're they got a leg up.
Exactly, 100%, 100%. And I think that's so I think what I was just saying kind of is it all kind of depends on how big you are, and again, what are you trying to achieve, with your brand? Yeah.
So you also have a new app. Is this correct? And we're not talking about WCW Monday Nitro. We're talking about Nitro. Is this accurate? What is Nitro?
Yeah. Okay. So so I'm working on a new app called Nitro. Right now, the URL is booknitro.com. And it really kind of comes out of my experiences working for TNA, where, it's gone through a couple of iterations. As I learn more about the business, because you can learn a little bit, but then you learn more as you talk to people. But it really kind of came out of this whole idea where I was kind of like walking around in the back and kind of, meeting with people, and it's like, they're all 1099 employees, or not employees, 1099 contractors, right? Or at least at the TNA level and down in the indies. And I just kept, scratching my head thinking, man, how in the world do these people get booked? And if you're kind of just starting out, how in the world do you get your name out there to the world? So I kind of came out of software before I was at TNA, and I thought, what, maybe there's a way to build an app where wrestlers are able to go in and maybe create a profile with, the type of wrestler they are, where their hometown is, where they're billed from, all their social media channels, all that sort of stuff. And then on the other side, allow promoters to log in and create an account, and then kind of run searches to say, hey, I got a show in Toronto on, next Saturday. I need a high flyer. I need a guy, and who's available next Saturday, who maybe, lives within 20 miles of Toronto. And it'll search and can find the people that maybe match your preferences. And you can send a booking request to them. On the back end. And then when they book, another hard thing for promoters is collecting all the information from the wrestler themselves. So, if the wrestler's got their social media channels and, the things they're open to, they can just, send a PDF back to the promoter and say, hey, here's all my social channels. So kind of like a booking management engine that kind of starts out with matching with the wrestlers and the promoters. But then, you think later on, maybe, referees, and you think photographers, and then, maybe there's a place for fans there. But just starting out. So, yeah, booknitro.com.
Great idea. I love it. Now I'm going to hand it over to Lavie, but Lavie may be a little shocked about this. Slammiversary did 7,600 people, Lavie. They was the record breaker for North America for TNA. You might be shocked because we were reporting for weeks that the number was moving up slowly. It launched in the last few weeks.
Yeah, so I think we'll peak with the case study, but I wanted to get ahead of things that Romy never gave up. Like at one point, she's like, "It's early. There's going to be ads and whatever." And I was like, "I totally respect her opinion, but there's no way." I mean, I didn't say that or express that, but that was my idea. But totally, I was wrong. And I've noticed with big events like this, and just speaking generally, maybe at first, like when momentum picks up, and it's a unique event, it's hard to tell where it'll end up, right? Like, well, whether it's AEW in England or a WrestleMania and all in and all out. Sort of like, how have you seen that like momentum, like as a professional in the field, but also as an observer, like when something takes off, like it just takes on momentum of its own?
Yeah. So maybe I have like 2 points here for you. So maybe the more basic one for any event, and then maybe later we can go into one of the things that I really loved that those guys did. But we'll start with the basics. So, when planning an event, and it's a pattern. It doesn't happen always this way, but there's really 2 tranches of when people are buying tickets. It's like when the event is announced, boom, you get a ton of people to buy it, maybe that first month. And then there's usually like nothing in between. And then it's like the month ahead or like 3 weeks ahead to the event is when people start actually buying again. And as marketer, you kind of plan ahead between those 2. And then I guess in the middle there, you try and do the best you can. So, a lot of times if you're going to do marketing budgets or whatever, at least the way I was doing it, spend a bunch of money up front to say, hey, we're going on sale and buy tickets now. And then at the end to say, hey, here's the card, here are the matches, and buy tickets now because that's the behavior of the fan.
So to go back in time and to start our case study, I'll call it a Harvard case study because that makes it sound more exciting. I don't know if it's actually the Harvard structure, but let's go back in time a little bit to basically TNA taking on some momentum. For me, it's sort of like that show in Vegas. I think it was a year ago when Scott D'Amore's like, we're TNA now, and he knew he was leaving, but like it was like a great exclamation point. A live transition that went to Ariel Schneer. Hopefully I'm not messing up the last name, who really, continued that momentum or added to it. There was successful shows all over the place, San Antonio, Montreal, and so on. And then in his regime, there was an announcement that I think it was like a multi-day announcement, right? There was going to be LA, which Dave Penzer aside, it was successful, depending on how you define a sellout. And then there was Slammiversary at the UBS Arena, which we know is a 17,000 NBA seat arena. So like when you're seeing this or involved in something like this, and again, for our listeners, Romy has been on the inside, helping to plan and steward and support these things, but also an observer at different points as well. So you can touch base and clarify where applicable. But like when you come to a point, like how does it come to a point where we've never done a number like this? We're getting a big building, like let's do it. And sort of like, what are those expectations?
Great question. So on my end, at least where I was in the organization, I was not on this sort of planning side of the arenas themselves. So essentially what would happen on my end is I would probably get an email maybe, a couple weeks ahead and say, hey, we want to go on sale this time and whatever it is. And so, that you guys have heard Raphael Morphy's name come up a lot. Like that would be his deal where he would, work with the venues to kind of get the contracts ready to go. And he would work alongside maybe Ariel or Anthony, who was the president at the time, or Carlos now, or whoever it is. Another guy, Dan, that's involved. And, they would kind of work through, where should we go? And then kind of someone like Raphael would go off and kind of execute on what it is. So, a lot kind of goes into it. I would say it's probably an art and a science on that side. We would look at certain things about like where the brand has done really well and, other places that maybe we haven't been to in a while. And then you kind of, you figure out what your risk tolerance is. Do you want to take a bigger swing on a bigger arena, which is likely more expensive, but also, you're able to maybe in a bigger market charge more for the tickets and get more people in the arena, which should then, add more to the balance sheet. Or, you could go safe and you can go pretty small and you're going to sell it out, but you might leave money on the table, if you go to a 500 or 1,000 seat arena. So, a lot of the conversations going on internally that I knew about were just like, hey, there's some momentum here. I don't know if you remember Lavie, but the Scott shows I think were in Vegas. There was 2 sets. There was like in January there was one that was Hard to Kill at the time, and then there was I think Rebellion, like which was a few months later was back there. And so some of those conversations kind of went on too, where it was like how soon is too soon to go back. But generally that was a little bit of the backstory of how you get there. Sometimes your boss just tells you. Other times, there's a big long conversation about it. But yeah, that's how it kind of came together there.
And at the point you're supporting it, or from what you've learned, like, is it to say, okay, we have this 18,000 seat venue, we're really going to go for it, we really think we can get 5,000 people, 10,000 people? Were there any expectations at that point? It's just sort of like, this is what we're going to set it up for to start, and as it goes, we have the room to expand.
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely was more of a what would you say, like a higher appetite for risk. I think when it came to some of these bigger venues, as you kind of saw this past year, like it was starting to build a little bit, and we went back to the 2,300 arena last year, and it was like it was a very quick sellout. So we knew, growth was in the future. I mean, I think, like I said before, it's a little bit of an art and a science. Like you don't want to leave money on the table. So you want to go as big as you can, but, also, as big as you can without, having an empty house on TV, and, or comping it, with a ton of free tickets, all over, because you can't sell that many. So it's, kind of trying to find that middle ground, I think, is really important. But we knew it was going to go a little bit bigger, and that's why we had that big announcement where we said, okay, we were in Montreal, we're going to go to LA, we're going to go to New York, we're going to go to Dallas in January, and then I think it was also Toronto was like the other one at the time.
So tickets go on sale, and they do well. Like in the initial on sale, I think it was over 2,000 tickets that moved like pretty quickly, and a lot of people were like, "Wow, this is off to a good start." Was everyone sort of like happy with how it went the first few days?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, everyone was really happy about how everything sort of kicked off, and I think it was almost very smooth in just the typical behavior of it. I think people were really excited to see TNA's growth, so maybe we got a little bit of a bigger pop in that first on sale, just generally because it was cool and people wanted to be a part of a big arena show for the brand. But what I would say is that, it was great. We saw the tickets get sold straight away, in that first month or so, boom, where we got a big pop. But then, the harder part is, okay, in the middle there, if things start to slow down, what do you do? Because if you're not spending a ton of marketing dollars until kind of the end, a month away, it's like you said, you gotta, you almost want to pull the car in on empty than, like have a lot of gas in the tank or not enough and end up short. So, that first tranche was really good and encouraging for us.
Yeah. And then, complicating things, I think, like there was a transition in management. Carlos Silva comes in, and he actually, like, I'm not sure, but like he would have the opportunity to be like, I didn't book this, that's on Schneider, like let's get out it. Like, sort of like, okay, we started out selling 2,000 tickets. We're now doing 40 to 60 a week. So we have many weeks to go, but that's just hundreds or maybe low thousands more. Let's get out of this. This is on Schneider. Do you think there was ever like that sort of thinking, or sort of like, we're in this, we're going to do this?
Yeah. I mean, so the meetings with the UBS Arena were happening. So, the company was in it. There's no way you could like pop out. And I do remember, maybe in kind of the early days when Carlos took over, I had a phone call with him where we had to walk through the plan because, it was so far off, but we were already kind of in it where we had decided what it was going to be. And we already signed contracts, for certain marketing things to lock it in early, TV spots and whatever. So, getting on the phone with him and Andrea at the time to kind of go over, all right, what are we already committed to do? When's it going to hit? And do we feel like it's enough? So, if I were sitting in Carlos's chair, like you got to get in and you got to kind of, understand all the pieces, who's doing it. And yeah, I mean, like it's a big stadium. So, I had the luxury, and I think a few people on the team had the luxury of kind of seeing the pattern happen a little bit. He's coming in fresh. So, he had no clue, up front of like what kind of TNA's typical pattern had been. So yeah, we had to talk to him a little bit about it. Yeah, it was fun. It was a good meeting.
One of the things that I had thought about even early on was sort of given that there's so much TNA enthusiasm online, but a lot of people just don't have the opportunity to go to a show because it doesn't come to an area. Was there ever the thought about like making it like a destination show, setting up travel packages, maybe some supplemental events, just to have people want to travel and participate in something unique?
100%. So maybe a slightly different example, because there are conversations that happen about that. And again, like I was at the event, I wasn't quite sure kind of where everything landed for this year's Slam, but last year's Slam, we definitely tried to make it a full week of events, and that was in Montreal. This was all the credit for a lot of this goes out to Ross Foreman, who kind of works a lot of the local angles with the with the different cities. So, I think at the time we had Jordan Grace do an arm wrestling match with the Canadians mascot, downtown. I don't want to say it was City Hall, but it was definitely like in the heart of Montreal. There were restaurants had different TNA inspired dishes. So, Ross is going to kill me, but it was the slammin' kickin' pretzel at one of the places that sold out really quickly, and then we had the PCO, the burger, at a restaurant, a little bit more outside of town.
And you have to remember how to say them in French, right? Otherwise, half the population will be very angry.
Exactly, 100%. And then also, like we had, the talent go to the basketball game. So like that whole week there was meet and greets and there was those sort of things. So, turning it into a destination is definitely a conversation that takes place. It's a great thing to do, especially for big events like Slam that happen in places where people, love to go to, like New York.
Okay. So, right. We got off to a good start. There's, a management change. We're going 60, 60, 60. We're getting to about 3,000, 3,500. And then WrestleTix is like, oh, actually, you know what? Some of these tickets were never for sale. So it's actually $29.90. And I'm just like, we're going backwards, people. And around that time, you had a posting. You're like, there is hope. And here's how it's going to work. Sort of like, so what gave you that confidence? And what was like the strategy you were thinking about at that point as we were getting closer?
Yeah, I just, so at that point, I just kind of knew what was coming. At least if things didn't change, because, cards subject to change always. But, at that point, no matches had been announced. It was just, hey, Slammiversary is going to be here. Don't you want to come see TNA? And, that can get you so far. But, once the matches and the event starts to come together, that's one. Once it gets a little closer, people are always last minute. That's two. And then also, like we had already committed to some additional advertising and marketing tactics that we're going to hit starting around, I think, July 1st. It was kind of a tough decision because you had the July 4th holiday in there. And so I remember chatting with the team. I don't remember who, but, do you start the advertising before July 4th when people might leave and not see it? Or do you do it after? And so, those are kind of the three main things. We just kind of knew what was coming. And then all the media tour hadn't hit either. So, I felt pretty confident that it would get to a really good spot.
Yeah, with and we'll get to AJ Styles a little bit later, but just in terms of the planning, was that one of the early things, like as the WWE relationship was merging, be like, maybe we can get, besides AJ Styles, maybe we can get Abyss or whoever it may be that have like sort of like some foundational connection to TNA where there is really like that sense of continuity.
So, I think no one knew, or at least I didn't know, if we were going to get somebody. But, I feel like there was always maybe a little bit of energy that, kind of around there that something could happen, or we wanted to plan something really cool, which you always want to plan something really cool for a pay-per-view. But, as you kind of go bigger, wouldn't it be nice if you can get something bigger? We all kind of assumed that, the boss would, have some trick up their sleeve.
So speaking of the boss, and sometimes it's hard to tell, who's the boss sometimes because of things change so much. But besides Len Asper, Carlos Silva, I thought that his media tour was one of the most, like from like a promoter's perspective, one of the most effective that I've ever seen. I think one of the strengths of it was that, obviously everything is marketing and perception and you're choosing what you put out there. But it just appeared that he was just so forthright in sharing juicy details. At least that would appeal to listeners of the show. Sort of like, we're working on a TV deal. We're not profitable. Even sharing that, like, sort of like it appeals. Like he just seemed very genuine, and you kind of wanted to like join the team. Like, and it was being in the New York media market, it was really capitalized and really owned the conversation for basically a week or two. What did you think of that?
What I love the most generally about maybe this Slammiversary cycle is that I thought the PR was, and I'll say this is in a positive way, out of control. TNA was everywhere. So, I thought, Carlos was in a lot of places. But you also had, I think, I don't remember if it was right before or after, but you had Santana, who was on Ariel Helwani, was Joe as well. Like, I feel like there was a handful of people like in succession that were on that show.
The Hardys.
That was the Hardys. That was it. And then, additionally, you had a lot of the local stuff going on too, as well. So like, I think this was a Santana. He was on, is it Subway Mania, where they do the like matches inside the train cars, like very cool, super fun. And it seemed like, the entire roster, including Carlos, were out doing PR and kind of pushing it hard. It was so much that I was almost like, oh my gosh, what are they going to do for Bound for Glory? Like at that point I was like, wow, it's a lot, which I thought was spectacular.
And just, getting both the Mets and the Yankees, so many different things. So when you start hearing the rumors of AJ Styles, and then Carlos Silva smartly like sort of played it, I'm like, this is going to be a disaster if AJ Styles isn't there. Sort of like played it off without saying it, and then they said it. Like, I know that there was sort of like challenges. Can we get him? Can we actually get him? Like, he'll come, but can we get him there? Like, and that's why I was wondering like why they were waiting so long. Like, when that news started hitting, what did you think about that, and how do you think it affected things?
Yeah, I think I saw the text, and I texted it to somebody and said, "Oh, they better deliver," because like everyone knows what that word means, and everyone was kind of almost waiting for this moment as once the partnership got signed. I feel like it was something that a lot of people were really excited about. And there were times like he definitely was around backstage once or twice. At different events. So we kind of knew it was kind of bubbling. We just didn't know, when it was going to happen. And, I can imagine that there were conversations about what makes the most sense, and what event makes the most sense. And then also like, what's he going to do? And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's many better places for AJ Styles to come back, than, the UBS Arena and TNA's like largest attended show in the U.S. and ever. So I think it was great choice.
So I'm not sure how closely you're following it, like 72 hours, 48 hours. I'd assume you have things to do, but
Yeah.
for me, I was like refreshing, checking, whatever it may be. Like, how closely were you following that? And like, what did you think about the momentum as it went along?
So this is I want to take that question and kind of like put a pin in it and talk real quick about something that I loved that I thought was really unique. And I say credit where credit is due. Like, we were talking a lot about the things that we had in place beforehand, but there's also this other piece of just, how do you actually manage the process in the arena and what do you do? And so, at the point, I think what you said, we were at maybe, 3,000 tickets or 3,500. And that's not where I'm at. A certain point, I wasn't paying that much attention. But, originally, I think the venue was planned for about 7,000 people or 7,500. I don't remember it offhand, but, it was set for a big amount, a reach, if you will. And, when the ticket sales were maybe a little sluggish going into that last marketing campaign, the capacity was set at like 4,500, I think, at the time on WrestleTix. And at the time, I didn't really appreciate. I was just like, oh, okay, maybe they, brought it down a little bit, like, because the nice thing about a big arena is you can move the stage closer and, still fill it. So, that was that. And then kind of as the show got closer, all of a sudden the messages started going out saying, hey, TNA's adding more seats. We're going to move the stage back. And then when AJ Styles is announced, it was like, let's say, I don't know how many tickets sold per day, but it was something like 1,000, wasn't it? Towards the end there, like 700, 600, like it moved quickly. And I thought it was really interesting because, if you start at a big, spot, but you want to make sure maybe ticket sales are sluggish, you can kind of move the stage in, so that if you don't get there, it still looks full. What a success. We did a great job. But then also, if surprises are happening or you're going to sell more, you're able to kind of add that momentum onto the conversations of people, because we're adding more seats is much better than why there's going to be 1,000 empty seats. So, maybe you get back to where you started, but you're able to kind of use, essentially marketing and communications to really drive some momentum. So I loved that. I thought that was a really cool strategy, because I bet they could have kept moving the stage back further, if they wanted to. Maybe not, but, I think that was really cool and a good way to kind of de-risk the whole thing.
Yeah, those big black curtains that they had for the upper level, they looked, I mean, you can see them, so they looked good on TV. Like, it looked like the venue was at capacity. So in terms of the number, what was it, 7633, John? Something like that. So
yes, 7633. Yep.
So you were there. It's hard to know, and this is pro wrestling. Was this every ticket taker, every usher, or this was like a firm number? Like, I know it was there, but like, was this like, what do you think, like a variance?
It felt full. Like, you look around, and at a certain point, I kind of turned to the person I was with and I said, this looks really impressive. Like, even the floor kind of, as it kind of fanned out, behind the ring, it felt full. Like, so, I'm not sure if they, counted every single person and brought them all in, and it was kind of a wrestling number, kind of being in there. It felt full. So, like, I it's got to be, at least close to accurate, even if even if it's a little bumped up, but no, it felt full. It was great.
Cool. Yeah, WrestleTix hasn't, like, I'm not sure if they're going to leave it alone, but they haven't, like, sort of given a final accounting. Basically, usually they have like vet ticks, how many ticks were comped, and so on. But I know that there's, like, in the middle, right between the floor and the upper level, there's like what's it called, like skybox type
Mhm.
seating. That might be a dated term, but like, so I'm assuming some people were there. Was there anything in the upper row open, or it was like it was all closed off?
I'm not sure. I didn't see it. I did see people in the suites or like the skybox area that you're saying. Like, they were, there were people there for sure. I don't recall seeing anybody up top. So I'm guessing it was probably all blacked off, and I'm guessing that number is probably full lower bowl. Tons of seats on the floor. But yeah, it was a great event. So I say shout out to the talent and everybody for making it happen.
So, when you have a successful event like this, sometimes can we do it again? So if it was up to you, if you were strategizing this, would you say, let's announce for next year and let's be more ambitious, and maybe we could even sell more. We can lead in more to the to people that want to travel because they know it was a moment, and maybe they don't have to do as much, of the awareness marketing because it's already been created, or like there's just so many unknowns a year out. It's too much.
So okay, so there's really like two questions there. It seems like
I always do that. At least two
I
are
love
rolled into
no,
one. Sorry about it.
no, I love it. I love it. I was just thinking about both. So I mean, Slammiversary next year. So like, let's see, when it was announced for this year, it was December. So there was like 6 months of lead time in between. That might have been too long, if I'm guessing, just because there was that middle ground that we just had a 20-minute conversation about, hey, ticket sales stalled, it's like, and it's not because of anything that anybody did. It's just like, it's that middle part where it's kind of just dead, and you got to do, you got to get the talent or the wrestlers to, events, and you just got to keep it top of mind. But, people aren't maybe opening their wallets. So I might not do it again in December for July. Maybe it's a few months, a month or two later. But I think another really interesting thing is the Bound for Glory arena wasn't announced until Slammiversary. And I think it's July now, the end of July, and that's going to be the end of October. So it's going to be like a tight 3 months sprint for them. And that feels right. I bet you they'll do really well with that. I think maybe it hurts a little bit on the planning for people, but yeah, 3-4 months is probably a sweet spot, I think, for announcing and getting there.
No, it's interesting because as we're recording this, they're running Rhode Island, and it's a pretty big venue, but like no one has any expectations of selling a lot of tickets. There's they'll curtain it off. It's the summer. It's less expensive to rent a college. They probably let them park in the parking lot, so people didn't have to go too far, whatever, and that works. So it's not always like, of course, the total capacity. So sort of the final part of our case study, sort of like what next, meaning like what so as in the article from John Wall Street, Carlos Silva's quote, it's referenced that TNA is not profitable. So we know that. So TNA it's always hard to tell like where are they going, right? Because there's all this talk about a TV deal. Sometimes TNA leans into spending more, right? Like bigger venues, we're hiring people, whatever it may be. Other times, and they lean back on, oh no, we're going to Nashville and we'll tape in that studio, and we're cutting back people and that sort of thing. So it's sort of like, excuse me, we're growing, we're not, whatever it may be. And then on the other side is sort of like, are you all in or are you for sale? Because if you're for sale, it's sort of a different thing. And doing something like this, running Slammiversary in New York, was this gussing up the pig? Are you trying to make it? Are you trying to make it look good so you could sell it for more money? So I know it's a complicated thing, and we might not have the answer today. But sort of like, just like, what do you feel like? What's this all for?
I mean, if I could answer that question, like that would be, it would be amazing. I don't know. I think that there's no downside to having a very exciting, hot business, as a whole, because, you have, I'd say, like optionality, where you can kind of look at all the different paths in front of you. And, you can kind of pick the one that makes the most sense and, is the best for the fans, is the best for the talent, is the best for your investors and just all the people, all the stakeholders. And you don't have that if your brand isn't hot. So, to me, I mean, I think it's TNA is at a really interesting inflection point where, it's going to start to become that sort of, optionality of where does, Len and Carlos and the team want to take it. Let's say UBS was so amazing. Let's say the suites had, some really great media people in there, and they back up the Brinks truck to York Ave in Toronto, and the money falls out, and oh my gosh, look at us, we've got an amazing, profitable company, and it's, we're going to keep rolling, we're going to keep going big, and we're holding, and wow, the value's there, or maybe somebody with deep pockets comes in and says, I love this, let's make a deal. Like, you could go that route too. So I think all the doors kind of open when you have a hot brand, and a lot of those doors maybe are a little more closed if you don't. So, I think that's, there's no downside to having, a hot brand that people want to, check out.
Awesome. This was great. Let me turn it over to John.
I always feel like when you have a big show like this, sometimes the momentum can shift downwards because you built, like Starrcade 97 WCW style, you built it up so much. There's only one way to go is down. And then like a booking decision, people, or if they're not happy. Sometimes though, you think it's the peak and it's not the peak, and the peak keeps going, and you can build even higher. What do you think? Where's TNA right now? Is this people upset? Oh, Mike Santana should have won. It's his hometown and a big crowd. Or do you build it up and do you put the heat, if you will, on Trick, and you keep building?
Yeah, great question. It's funny. We spent 45 minutes talking about, business, and like, oh my gosh, we ran, banner ads in the subway, or wherever it is. And like, people showed up. They show up because of the talent, and they show up because of the creative, and they're invested, in the athleticism and the story and all that sort of stuff. So like, it's the most important part of wrestling. And then we just get to have fun and, try and get people to show up. But a lot of times if the story's good, they'll keep coming. And sometimes you get to say, wow, my job's really easy because, and other times your job's maybe a little more difficult. You never really know, we have writers that write stories, and, you just gotta, they have to connect. And, no story's a bad story. Just sometimes it doesn't connect. I think, where my brain was when I was sitting in the arena, I thought that, Santana I would have wanted to see him win. That's why I was there. But, already today, I think, there's a live Impact going on right now in Rhode Island. I caught maybe the first 10 minutes of it before I joined with you guys. And, it seems like, this is kind of building towards a TNA, versus NXT type, storyline where, hey, the belts are held hostage by somebody else. Oh my gosh, we have to go get them back. We're all going to band together, and we're going to, invade whatever that is. So, Slammiversary is kind of almost building towards Bound for Glory now. Now, the story, is the story. And so, like, you asked kind of where I think it's going to be. Like, I think it's still kind of building. I think last year we had the kind of Joe Hendry thing at Slammiversary where there was that big, I think it was a 6-way match where he didn't win, and but then he kind of made his way back to Bound for Glory of last year, and he didn't win again, and then he won at Genesis. And so I mean, I think it's kind of building towards this pinnacle event where TNA is going to try and get their belts back. You also have Hardys and Dudleys, which is I don't know if it's signed, but there was a promo about it, and so that's getting closer. So I mean, I think at least the creative is kind of building towards something more, and so I'm excited to see. It's so soon. I don't know kind of what the the sentiment is, and I guess we'll kind of find out as we get closer to BFG if it's connecting or if it's not.
Wrestling is so weird and so fickle, and the fans can be very weird and fickle, because years ago they were building up Bobby Roode. This is many years ago. They were building up Bobby Roode, and he ends up losing to Kurt Angle. They did the same thing with Joe Hendry, but it kind of worked out for him. And then obviously the WrestleMania moment, and that kind of worked out. But it's almost thinking like everyone was complaining, oh, Cody Rhodes should be Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 39. But it led to huge business, the biggest year they ever had financially, leading into WrestleMania 40 and beyond. So you never know. I mean, it could have been the right, could have been the wrong. Santana maybe winning in Lowell, Mass could work, maybe not. I mean, it's weird to call, but it could work.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think if you were to ask 10 fans, maybe you'll get 10 different answers. But it seemed like last year, it worked out really well for Joe at Genesis, like the champ. He had his moment. Would people have rather have seen him win, at Bound for Glory, a few months earlier? Like, same with Cody. Like, I think, WWE, it worked out so well for them. It's an interesting, timing, creative, even the performances in the ring, like it all kind of comes together to make a really interesting, fun product to work on and talk about.
And think about this, might be a crazy stretch here, just throwing this out there. There was a little group and a little faction called the NWO that kind of took all the titles and kind of dominated the scene, and WCW became huge. Who knows? Maybe NXT versus TNA. I don't know, but you never know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at least based on what I saw earlier tonight and probably in the next couple of weeks, might be building to something, cool like that. We'll see.
All right, let's wrap this one up and let's head towards the plugs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2Man Power Trip. How about you, Dr. Lavie?
Follow me on X at Lavie Marg, LAVIE-MARG, and we're getting so close to 150 members of our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business, especially since that City Tutors evening where Romy joined us and many attendees joined as well.
Romy, give us all your plugs again, and Nitro, where everybody can find that.
Sure. So find me on Twitter. I'm active at Romy Glazer, ROMYGLAZER, and it's the same handle on Instagram or wherever else you want to find me. The app we were talking about, booknitro.com. Check it out. Give me a hard time. I love critiques. We're building it for wrestlers and promoters to start, but more to come on that. So poke around, let me know what you think. Would love to hear from you.
All right. Thank you, everybody out there, for tuning in. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.